And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm very excited to be joined today by Kurt Hemecker. He's the CEO of Mina Foundation, and we are going to talk all things zero knowledge and the applications of ZK for Web3, for dApps, and for the wider industry. Kurt, how are you doing today, my friend? Are you well?
I am well, and thank you so much, Anthony. Really excited to be here and with your audience as well.
That's awesome. Kurt, you have quite an impressive background in terms of the Web3 projects and non-Web3 projects that you have in your background, PayPal, Diem, and now Mina. Could you briefly give us your Web3 origin story and how did you find your way into working with blockchain tech?
Yeah, thanks. Well, actually, I've been around before web and web. I've been through Web 0, 1, 2, and 3. But before joining Mina, I was with the Libra DM project pretty much from start to finish. And as that was wrapping up, I was looking around for what would be an interesting team and what was kind of the emerging technology, a really nascent technology at the time. And that was in the end of 2021, start of 2022, where I joined Mina Foundation initially as a chief operating officer, and then now with our domiciliation into Switzerland, assume the role of chief executive officer. I did just want to pause, Anthony, and just one thing. I'd like to wish you and all of your listeners, all of the listeners here, or people participating, a very happy Bitcoin Pizza Day. Because yes. 2010, was it 2010, May 22, somebody paid 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza. I think it's worth a mere 620 million now.
That's a lot of money to pay for a pizza in today's money. And this is one of the major challenges that I find with paying for things in crypto some of the time. If it's a store of value, you're essentially paying for things with your pension, which generally speaking is not necessarily a great way to think about how to pay for things or how to exchange value. However, happy Bitcoin Pizza Day to you too, Kurt. Have you got pizza nearby? Do you have a slice with you?
I had it for lunch.
There we go. Fair enough. I'm looking around for anything that could represent pizza here in the office, but I'm afraid nothing of the sort. Let's jump into Mina. And I think for the longest time, Mina was known as the tiny blockchain or the super light blockchain. Really impressive in terms of being able to say this is a blockchain that can be operated on any machine, can be stored, has the ability to be light and accessible by all. But I think in recent years, we've seen the zero knowledge story come out a lot stronger. And I, unsurprisingly, working with Midnight, am particularly bullish on zero knowledge technology. But for those people who don't know Mina's origin story, could you share a little bit around what you find particularly interesting about Mina and what are you guys working on right now?
Got it. No, thanks. First of all, I mean, zero knowledge itself is a major step forward in what's being built around blockchain and Web3. But the origin story was two gentlemen, the two co-founders, Evan Shapiro and Izzy Meckler, who had been playing around with blockchain for quite a while and looking at the original ones, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And they noticed that as time goes on, the size of the blockchains grows just massive in size. And then, of course, the infrastructure, the capability of running a node, you have to re-execute every transaction. It takes a long time to actually then, and now a lot of infrastructure to fully benefit and participate in a blockchain like that. And there was an emerging applied math at the same time as zero knowledge mathematics, the kind of the ground zero of zero knowledge was Berkeley, where Izzy was doing a PhD in applied mathematics. And sort of the eureka moment was, hey, we can use zero knowledge to create a proof of the consensus state of the blockchain, thereby having a very small memory instance sized state of the entire blockchain so that any device could then benefit from the security of a blockchain, but without all the extra baggage and storage and work required to spin up a node. So you could have the same benefit of a full node, but running from something that would be run in a browser or a mobile device. And I can talk more, but I'll just pause there for a second in case there's another question or comment.
Already a strong start. So the premise, the underlying promise of Mina is that it's light. It's easy to be operated everywhere. But you guys have gone far beyond that at this point, right? It's not just about being the lightest blockchain. ZK is being applied further out.
Correct. And just kind of to finish, for those who might not be familiar with Mina and some of its origins. So Izzy and Evan started a company called O of One Labs that developed the protocol. Initially, it was called Coda, changed the name to Mina. The mainnet for Mina went live in March of 2021. So the first, I believe it was the first native zero-knowledge layer 1 blockchain launched at the time. And that's at the same time Mina Foundation was spun out of that. And so again, the job of the foundation is to foster and help develop the use of the protocol and support its path towards decentralized governance as well. But again, a lot of people have seen zero knowledge, certainly in the context of scalability, for addressing a lot of the challenges around Ethereum with congestion, high cost. And a lot of projects like Mina, like I think Midnight as well, have noticed that there's so much more that can be done with zero knowledge around privacy, around security, around, I think some people have called it like selective disclosure, where you can prove that statements are true without giving away the actual data underlying those statements. So it's becoming a very exciting, very competitive space. I think we're still at such a nascent state of the industry, and you know, we're still probably at the tail end of what I'd call the R&D phase, and now really everyone's looking for what is the product market fit for that. But the way I look at it, Anthony, is at like a large scale. If you take any industry-wide data set, whether it's finance data, health, medical data, records, media, news, artistic, and you add a layer of ZK programmability over those data sets that allow that data to be kept secure, private, and just selectively what aspects of that you want to disclose for something, it becomes very, very powerful. The question is, what are going to be the first use cases that really take off? And I think anyone who's following like ZK will hear the same things no matter who you're talking to, right? I think we all talk about compliance and how zero knowledge can bridge the compliance requirements of traditional finance with the sort of the privacy requirements of Web3. And so providing zero knowledge proofs of KYC and passport so that the data is actually not being propagated all over the internet, but just the proof that, okay, this is a valid entity. But any ZK, any project that's in ZK programmability will be telling you about similar use cases, right? Voting is another use case. And these are the ones I agree. I think these will be some of the initial ones. But I think there's something more exciting even here. And I don't think we've seen the tip of the iceberg yet. And, you know, if you think back at how all this stuff evolved, right? Back when computer science was starting, when computer technology was starting, and people were building chips, they had no idea what the chips were going to be used for. It was like, let's get a chip out there that has like a faster clock, a faster processor speed, more RAM. Let's condense as many circuits as we can onto a piece of silicon. They knew they were building them for devices, but nobody knew like you and I would be, you know, over that layer of technology talking today, free of charge across the world, video or social networks, AI, Netflix. No, like nobody knew those applications. They were just like, this is just a fundamental breakthrough in technology. And I think similarly, zero knowledge is a massive breakthrough in the evolving world of blockchain, because you no longer need to re-execute every single transaction to get the state of something. That's a massive, massive breakthrough, which I think changes the way that blockchain in general works, and the way, you know, people had originally been thinking about it. And the question is now, where do we all go from here?
That's a really nice way of putting it. There's so much in there I want to unpick, because I think talking about ZK being able to compress, improve the performance of the decentralized internet, which already is challenged because of the way blockchains operate, the way you have to have validation, the way you have block production. It's not quite as real time and fast all of the time, but if we can compress certain parts of that, you get performance benefits. So if we already know the decentralized internet is a good thing, Web3, whatever you care to call it, the use of decentralized applications, if we can increase or improve the performance or reduce the weight of those things, it becomes more accessible. If we're able to improve the scalability of the chains, that makes them more accessible, more usable. We're still at the infrastructure layer. And as you described, at that point, we've got more usable infrastructure that more people can start building applications on top of. The other thing that I was ready to jump in on the second you said it is that, we have privacy or secrecy on Web3. The interesting thing for me is we have pseudonymity, but I don't think we have privacy. And if you look at a lot of the on-chain transactions, we have a lot of transparency, possibly too much transparency. And if you look at, all it takes is for somebody to leak a wallet address or to be able to dox a wallet address, and all of a sudden you've got transaction history, the smart contract somebody's engaged with. It's basically like giving away their bank account details and their browser history to everybody on the planet, which I'm sure a lot of people out there listening would be deeply nervous about. And so we have pseudonymity, but blockchains are not very good at keeping secrets, or blockchains are not very good at protecting data and privacy. And I think it's important to create a separation between privacy and data, because even in that, you've got the requirement for business-to-business transactions. I see a huge amount of potential in business-to-business digital assets or IP transfers on Web3. And if you're not comfortable being able to present your business, your project, your proposal, your wallet address, details around you as an organization, and to be able to do that on chain, I've had very many clients back from my Deloitte and IBM days who said, we love the idea of decentralized applications. The challenge for us at the moment is we don't want all of our business and operational data on chain, because that if that can be deconstructed, or if that can be correlated later, that's not good news for our competitive advantage. And so you've got individual freedoms and individual privacy or pseudonymity, which is not as pseudonymous as most people think, right? You give Chainalysis 6 data points and they can tell you what you had for breakfast. You've then got commercial sensitivity or commercial data privacy and data protection, which we also need to be able to protect or to preserve if we really want to see mass adoption. If we want to see widespread use of dApps, it's more likely to come from B2B or B2C activities than it is from retail and P2P. And so we've got to get to that place. At least that's my thesis at this point in time.
Got it. Yeah, no, I think I tend to agree with everything you just said. And again, it all comes down to there's different ways of approaching it. And I think also there's, for anything to scale, there's some kind of centric middle ground, right? Like the share everything with everybody, every, regulatory body, et cetera. That's a little bit the extreme. The other extreme is, just being completely anonymous, which also it's just never going to scale, right? Like, and just, no sovereign country is just going to let, that kind of environment flourish.
Sad truth is developers have gone to jail for that, right? If you look at Tornado Cash and other examples, whether they were deliberately nefarious or not, regulators are taking a very negative view on full privacy or full anonymity projects. And I'm not against compliance. I'm not against regulation. Most of Web3 wants proactive regulation so we can all get on with our jobs. And so, like, I fully agree. The full privacy or full anonymity-based solutions, in most cases, are probably not going to work.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's exactly where zero knowledge can help, because it helps bridge those two worlds where you can provide some level of assurances that there's been screening, these are valid actors. And again, it's a job, it's a job of, like, people may not like it or appreciate it, and nobody wants like a nanny state, but like it is the job of government and these bodies to help protect their populations. And it's just, again, getting that balance of protection versus control and submission, correct. But anyway, I think the good news is what we're working on collectively, zero knowledge is something that can help bridge those two worlds. And but there's a lot of things that need to happen as well too. Like, at the moment, I don't think there's any regulator that will accept a zero knowledge proof of ZK KYC credential and say that satisfies the current regulation we have in place for AML and KYC. It now provides comfort, right? And certainly if you're an entity or involved in a decentralized protocol that is allowing actors to transact, at least there's some comfort that, okay, there's been some screening and I know that these entities are valid. So you minimize the risk of having an issue. But we have to get to a point too where the regulation technology, the reg tech, the policy will start accepting what things like zero knowledge can bring as valid control parameters that they'll accept and that organizations can lean behind as they ramp up their services and programs.
100%.
And I think
some people look at ZK as a black box, right? And to some extent, it almost is. On one side, you've got data that will only ever remain on the user or the client system. You have a circuit in the middle that does computation, and then you have an outcome which says, to oversimplify, yes or no. KYC credential is valid, not valid. If you're a regulator, you then have to basically audit the black box. So you have to be at a level of competence to look at the circuit that's been created to be able to generate the proof and validate the proof and say, this fits with at least the requirements of credential generation and validation. It certainly doesn't fit the process, because the process today has at no point in the process does it say validate through zero knowledge circuit or create proof, validate proof. It's send credential to third party stores in database, tries not to get hacked, and has to have an overhead of governance and compliance with the sensitive data it holds in its own databases. Which that's not the way things work today, but it's certainly this place we need to get to.
Yeah, and one of the things too, I like Mina is not a privacy chain, right? Like you were talking, and there are different chains. There's different approaches to, this challenge that we're all trying to get to, and right now I think there's plenty of space for a lot of different kinds of approaches, but I always like to clarify, like Mina itself is not a privacy, like the layer one, it's pseudonymous, right? And like you said, you can see transactions and amounts, but you can program privacy on top of that. And again, my big thing is making that programmable in a compliant way.
Yeah, and that's the role of the application developer, right? You've provided the tooling to say, however much of this transaction or this workflow you want to make public or private is up to you. If you make it fully private and you're starting to shield regulatory required transactions, that's probably not compliant.
Exactly.
But we are enabling anything on that spectrum, and it's up to you to choose where you are and whether you are compliant.
Exactly. So, we're very careful too about where and at what layer we want things enabled, because we want to, make sure it's built on a solid foundation as well.
100%. And at the term of foundation, that's a perfect segue. I don't know whether you planned that one or not, but it was a perfect segue. I do want to talk about the role of Mina Foundation and of foundations in general, because I think that's something that for people who are working in enterprise, corporate, government institutions, the idea of a foundation probably typically relates as kind of charitable activity or something like that. Whereas in the world of Web3, it's very, very different. Before we jump into that, though, I do want to remind anyone listening in, this is a LinkedIn Live. So if you have any questions for Kurt, if there's things you want to know about Mina, things you want to know about zero knowledge, things you want to know of what we're talking today, please do put your questions in the comments section. Please do let us know what you want to know about, and we'll do our best to either answer those questions as we go along, or we'll try and come to them at the end of the show. I'll do my best to multitask in the middle of all that. And let us know where you are. Give us your GMs. Tell us where you are in the world. It's always interesting to know where you guys are, what projects you're working on. So please also grab the chat, go give us your DMs and let us know where you are and what you're doing. Back to the foundation. So Kurt, Mina Foundation, give us a little bit of an insight into what is the day-to-day role of the foundation? What do you get up to? What do your teams get up to? How are you supporting the foundation today?
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, and it's a great question, because there's Mina Foundation and then there's Mina Protocol, which is the blockchain, and they're not the same thing, right? They're two different things. And then there's many different parties involved in supporting the protocol. O of One Labs is still, a very thought-leading and engineering partner along this journey. There's other companies that are building and a wide community of developers as well that are digging into this. So the role of foundation, it's not quite charity, but it is kind of public goods to promote, to help the protocol grow, to help it in its path towards decentralized governance and get the protocol to a state where it's in a self-sustaining state, which means that the businesses, the transactions being generated on the protocol can support further development of the protocol, and also that there's enough users and applications that can make a livelihood and kind of this self-sustaining flywheel. And I think the role of the foundation, initially, it's really providing a lot of the subventions, the grants, and I think other folks and foundations this might resonate with, but it's like it's really hard, right? First of all, this completely new business paradigm, new technology. These foundations, are created when the Genesis blocks go live, and the community is very demanding. They expect like a perfectly formed entity that's going to be, set up to go and functioning at like, full capacity from the get-go. These things take time, as much as the technology takes time to develop it. And a lot of things people don't see, right? If you're not out there shouting about it all the times, we tend to keep our heads down, maybe a little too much, and we're just busy working with our community of developers, working on advancing the protocol. But over time, I think, and this is true, and I think not just for Mina Foundation, but many foundations in the Web3 space, where all of a sudden it'll shift. So instead of like grants and things coming from the treasury of the foundation, but it's basically, as the protocol sort of grows up and is getting more usage, and like we were saying, getting that flywheel going, then it's in a position where it can support organizations like the foundation that can provide maybe not commercially generating things, but things that are required infrastructure, public goods, the traffic lights, the delivery, mail delivery service, but kind of the public goods infrastructure that is required, the ways of governing the improvement proposals, and kind of all the activity. So I think the role of the foundations shift over time, and it depends on the maturity of the particular blockchain and its ecosystem.
I hear you with that. And also, being somebody who's working in a project that is developing a layer 1 protocol and looking at decentralization and looking at scaling up and spinning out, there is a ridiculous amount of work that sits behind it. It's utterly fascinating, but there is a lot to it. And also a lot rides on the community, the popularity of the chain, the activity that happens on chain. Funding becomes a big part of the story as well. It's not something you can get away from, and it behaves very differently, at least in the early days, to traditional corporates or traditional startups. VC funding can come in, and that's maybe kind of a bridge to the way a fully decentralized foundation with a fully decentralized treasury can operate versus an early stage startup. But I wanted to pick on something. You mentioned at the beginning of the show you're in Switzerland. And yes, Switzerland is a very well-known jurisdiction, very well-known location for foundations. Ethereum is there, ICP is there, Web3 Foundation is there. Could you give the audience just a little bit of an insight into why Mina Foundation is in Switzerland, and what was some of the thinking behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? There is a little bit of competition, I think, between different states and countries for certainly now for crypto and blockchain. But Switzerland has always been a front runner, kind of, or an early adopter. I think early adopter is a better way to say that. In large part, I think also due to the fact that that's where Ethereum Foundation also was first built and started. So there's a really clear regulatory framework, right? Tokens are classified either as a security token, utility token, or a payment token, or a hybrid. And they're typically, the regulator FINMA, the Financial Markets Authority, is typically not regulating through enforcement actions. And so as you have a nascent industry, right, and you have folks that want to be good actors and behave, but it's hard to operate with if there's no clear framework, right? And so I think, a large part the choice was let's continue growing the foundation under a clear framework that allows the breathing room to do that. Saying that, I think no matter where you are in the world, we all pay attention to what happens in the U.S. and make very certain to stay on the right side of the regulatory requirements wherever you are.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, there are some markets that lead, some markets that, are gateways to certain regions. I mean, if you look at Hong Kong and Singapore, for example, Korea is getting increasingly progressive. Japan's moving incredibly quickly. There are, 199 countries elsewhere in the world that you can go and establish in, that you can go and sell services into. But there just happens to be that one very large one that happens to be driving a lot of the financial services industry, driving a lot of the investment industry. If you ever want to do a Series A, there's pretty much only one jurisdiction in the world you can ever really do it in. These things matter, unfortunately. Yeah. And also, if you want to be a business that has longevity, you would like to make sure that from the start you're setting up as a reputable operation, that you're being mindful of the strategy, the product, the technology, the community that you're trying to take out and you're trying to grow. If you type an email wrong, or if you misrepresent something on a marketing document or a light paper, you don't really want to be staring over your back the whole time thinking, oh God, I wish I hadn't said that. Am I suddenly going to get my Wells notice the next day, or am I going to get my letter from Gary? It's an unfortunate way of trying to do business. And so I definitely, I share your sentiment. Let's move on from the SEC and Gary, because this is definitely not the focus of today's show. But again, it's always interesting, and I think it's important for people to get an insight into the role of foundations and what actually goes on, because it is a unique nature, or it's a unique part of how Web3 grows up. If you look at Cardano, there was a tripartite relationship early on. You look at Polkadot, you've got Parity as a for-profit organization, Web3 Foundation as a non-for-profit foundation. Very, very different setups. But if you ever want to work in Web3, this is a nuance that you need to be aware of. And if you're joining a project, what's the structure? Am I joining the foundation? Am I joining the engineering team? Or am I joining something else? Am I joining a treasury-funded community hub that has nothing to do with the layer one or the foundation to the start with? Another super interesting thing, NEAR were pioneering this from very early on, having regional-based hubs that were treasury-funded that had absolutely no accountability whatsoever to the founding organizations and only accountability to the community. And so these are, I think, fascinating nuances to the world we live in. And a lot of people don't realize that's how it works day to day. Let's jump on to apps and use cases, because again, that's what people are here for. They want to hear what's being built. How can this technology work for me? We talked about ZK for scalability. We talked about ZK for programmable privacy or data protection. We talked about the dApp builder having a lot of control over how the protocol is used or how the technology is used, which we know is true. You're not allowed to have favorites, I'm sure, but of the examples you give to demonstrate what's Mina being used for today, what are the ones you often give, or what are the ones that you think are most relatable to people when you talk about why should I be using a blockchain, or why should I be using Mina and ZK?
Yeah, so I think, again, backing up even before you start talking about use cases, at the core, it's a technology play, right? And it's a fundamental shift, again, like we were saying before at the beginning of the podcast, in the way blockchains operate, because you no longer need to re-execute every transaction. You can rely on that constant size proof. And one of the areas, as we were saying before, like there's a lot of different, ZK is now starting to explode all over the place. There's a lot of projects on ZK, and there's slightly different flavors, and it can be a very confusing space, right? And like, why is one flavor of ZK different than another? One of the ingredients in the Mina mix, which is really interesting, is this concept of infinite recursion. And that's what allows the size of the blockchain proof to be the constant state. And now the same capability is available in the ZK app framework, which means that if you have a ZK app running an infinite amount of data, in other words, that app can be run, or a smart contract run over that ZK app that rolls, it can be executed an infinite amount of times, updating its state, and the size of that will never get any bigger than it already is. And that's super powerful because you can break up complex computations into smaller chunks relying on the previous computation. You can have multiple different sort of concurrent computations going into that. So it's sort of like a fundamental building block of blockchain compute that can be used for like blockchain to blockchain transaction bundling. But in terms of and then if you start thinking about terms of the use cases, or maybe more of the exciting retail use cases, the one I mentioned before, right, I think is maybe it doesn't sound too sexy to a lot of people, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's sexy until it isn't, but it's like helping bridge compliance, private compliant privacy. And, having things like zero knowledge proof of a passport wrapped up into an SSID credential attached to a wallet. And we are working on projects like that. There's a company called Hakata that's building on us. Another use case is voting. There's a South Korean company called Punkpol, which they've actually have run voting for some of the Korean government. But the reason why voting is such an interesting use case is because it allows, first of all, if you're an organization or a government running a vote, right, one of the challenges is who's eligible to vote? How do I ensure that there's no, like, not multiple, voting or Sybil attacks? So using zero knowledge proofs, you can have a incontestable proof that this voter is unique and valid. And at the same time, as a voter, right, you're concerned, like, oh man, do I want my vote to become public? Particularly in a world where, depending on what the vote is, it can be very polarized. You might not want your viewpoint or your vote to be public. So you can vote in a way that says, okay, this is a valid vote. We don't know who or what entity placed the vote, but we know it was valid, and we know that this was the thing they voted for. And that's where zero knowledge becomes very exciting. And Punkpol have kind of combined zero knowledge with KYC, with social graphs to address that. And I think that's interesting. Another area which is really interesting and becoming more and more relevant every day is around, and I'll use the buzzword of the year, AI and large language models. But, with all this compute happening around us, it's becoming very confusing. What's real? What's not real? And has something been run against the set of instructions, or can it be verified that this was computed in the way it was meant to be computed? And specifically, what does that mean? Well, it means, let's say, one project that we like to talk about that's building on us is called BioSnark. And they're looking to advance the research and development around biomedical and the pharmaceutical industry. And a key part of that, Anthony, is proprietary combinations of molecules, which then can generate a certain output. And now, of course, as a researcher, right, and if you come across this unique cocktail that you've been able to build, you don't want to give away the ingredients for that. But if you want to advance research and development, you'd like other people to benefit from providing input and getting output from it, knowing that it's been run against that proprietary model. And that could be, in this case, it's actual, like, molecular components, but this could be a data model, it could be a large language model, it could be AI type model. And so you can be guaranteed that the inputs I'm providing have been run against this verified model, and here's the output that's coming out from it. And the advantage there is you can then share the model and the results without giving away your secret sauce.
Yep, it liberates the intellectual property, and I think enables a level of trust on kind of early stage or even late stage B2B. This was a similar or analogous use case to a program we were doing at IBM with Renault on their manufacturing supply chain. You had tenders for different second, third, fourth, fifth tier, in some cases, suppliers to produce certain materials, certain chemicals, whatever it could be that goes into sub-assemblies or components for manufacturing. And these guys are, they have thousands of different suppliers from all around the world. But if they have a specific formulation, Renault needs to know that that formulation is compliant with regulation, but the supplier doesn't want to give away their particular formula or their particular recipe because they might see the OEM taking that and giving them to their nearest large competitor who could do it for 10% the price and lose business. Back to the, what's the potential of ZK story here? This liberates small business to work with larger businesses in a low trust environment. Right? This liberates sensitive data, like you said, medical data, it could be performance data, telemetry data, to improve the quality or the safety or the personalization of tons of experiences, but without actually sharing the sensitive data that underlies it. And that can be huge.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if you think about telemetry data or transport logistic data, I think, we will see DEXs being built on top of, certainly on top of Mina as well, and leveraging the benefits that can be created from running something on a native zero knowledge platform, like, minimizing minor extractable value, or being able to create private trading pools, and that applies, whether it's DEX financial trade data, or like you mentioned, just other kind of business to business trade data, being able to bundle transactions, wrap them into a zero knowledge proof so you can prove the settlement without giving away the actual details of the execution on chain is something super, super powerful.
I love being able to have these sorts of conversations with others who get it. Not get it, I don't mean that, but people who are working with these sorts of capabilities and these sort of communities at the same time, because you end up having a conversation about 20, 30, 40 near technically possible, definitely feasible, and possibly in production applications that literally people are only just catching up to build. And the frustrating part, or I guess frustrating part, or the reality of it is we've just finished building the infrastructure on which people can build these things. And we're going to see the applications coming next, right? We had Ethereum and Hyperledger Fabric 7 years ago, whenever it was. And we only really started seeing decentralized apps or some of the consortium chains really scale up about 3 years later. And it's trying to, I guess, kind of contain your excitement, or at least harness that excitement and help others to build meaningful things quickly. Because I guess the other challenge is some of these problems are non-trivial in terms of the size of the counterparties you're working with, right? 2 dApp developers sitting in a garage somewhere in the middle of nowhere are unlikely to have success instantly by taking on Ford Motor Company. Exactly. Or pitching something to Google tomorrow. I'm not saying it's not possible, but the difference between creating proofs of concept and doing actual meaningful digital transformation is non-trivial. And I guess possibly from your experience, certainly with PayPal and then latterly Diem, to really change the world at that scale is hard work.
Yeah, and collectively, right? Like, I think it's a collective effort for folks like yourself and projects in the industry, and we're getting there, right? And it's interesting too, because a lot of innovation, we can sit here and probably generate, Anthony, you and I and others on this call, like hundreds of great ideas, but you never know what's going to be the one thing that takes off. Like, and if you just look at past examples, right? Like the yellow sticky notes created by 3M, that was an accident, right? It was just the glue wasn't strong enough. Oh, but we can use it for something, or something, kind of the area where I first really came to age professionally was around mobile technology and SMS messaging. Initially, that was just a signaling channel on telecom networks. It wasn't developed for messaging, right? And then it became a thing, like, wow, we can use this for like really cool targeted messaging, and then all these other messaging apps came out of it. And so, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. We do need to try. We need to work on bending product roadmaps. We need to have, it's all about dialogue and community and talking to people. Like, what are the problems? What are we trying to solve? Is what we're building, is it fit for purpose? No. Okay, let's go back and change it and update it. And it's just a massively iterative process. And it, it's what we're all involved in collectively as an industry. And it's just wild.
Couldn't agree more. And I wanted to kind of touch on something from what you said earlier about, we started illustrating kind of why regulators are obviously clearly less familiar with ZK at the moment. Part of that is in the tooling, part of that's in the building process. In your view or in your experience, what do you think is needed to see wider use or wider development on these sorts of technologies? Because, or with Mina specifically, because in some cases you have slightly esoteric programming languages, or there's a hurdle for adoption and development because of programming, or above and beyond the language, actually the programming model itself, in terms of creating circuits as opposed to writing logical code that execute slightly differently. What do you think are some of the things that we need to work on next to start seeing Mina and others more used or more widely adopted?
Yeah, and I think there's a number of projects, right, that see what some of the issues are, and we're kind of pulling in similar directions. I think I don't think there's any one silver bullet, but it's a combination of a number of things. One is, one big thing is, how easy is it to develop software or write in it? So our library framework is built off of TypeScript. Folks here will know that's like one of the most common programming languages or web development languages that are out there. So you make it easily intuitive for people to understand how these libraries fit. I think Midnight uses TypeScript as well. So fantastic.
We had the same realization, that make it easy to code with. The second you create an unusual language that requires 3 years of training to be able to become proficient with, you're going to alienate a very, very large part of the addressable audience. So also, not for nothing, learn from the experience of those who've gone before you. Right.
Yeah. And then the other part is really just education around what is the right use for the technology, right? Because not everything needs a blockchain. Not everything needs zero knowledge. Not everything needs zero knowledge in a blockchain. So like, what are the things that do? And of course, I think the things you and I touched upon earlier in the podcast, like compliant privacy, telemetry, privacy around financial transactions, all those things, I think are valid candidates for blockchain and zero knowledge proof. But the other piece is, so the other piece is just educating developers what they can create, and then I think policy discussions. We haven't been super active on that score yet, but I would like to see Mina starting to become more active, for example, in Europe around digital identity discussions that are happening, and just getting closer on how can zero knowledge proofs be used as part of, a wider part of some of the ways that those challenges are going to have to be addressed.
For sure. We just saw this week the European Digital Identity Framework come into force, which means which doesn't mean it comes into force now and we start getting to use stuff, but it's now we start seeing application development and a framework to be able to build under. And 2026, I think, is when we start seeing the European Digital Wallet Initiative. What the potential there is of having at least block-wide 30-plus country acceptable standard for digital identity, potentially super powerful. Obviously, it has its limitations by being started from a Web 2 and governmental standpoint, but a lot of the thinking has gone into it is around W3C verifiable credentials, around some of the decentralized identity activity and the potential of what can happen. So it's like Mika as well. It's kind of some good, some bad, but at least it's a start.
Yeah. And then, at the core, though, it's developers, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be developing the applications that leverage these technologies. And, I think we need to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall to see which ones are going to stick, which ones aren't going to. So I guess, let's throw as much spaghetti as we can.
Good job you're near Italy to be able to find a regular source of high quality spaghetti. But I'm with you. Be patient, because with the infrastructure is ready, or we believe the infrastructure is ready, but the applications on top of that infrastructure and the tooling to enable others to build applications, that was the laggard between Ethereum and the size of the DeFi industry or the gaming community that we now see making use of it. Then the kind of the follow-ons from seeing other chains with more use of JavaScript in development, as opposed to said esoteric or new programming languages that reduce or kind of make it harder for traditional enterprise or individual or startup developers to be able to jump on. If you don't make it easy for people, they're not going to build. And so unless they genuinely believe and you've got something first of a kind that no one else has ever done before, but we've got to make it easier for the developers. We've got to make it easier for regulators, for sure. We've had a few questions come in, and
Sure.
one of them we did kind of already get to. So a question from a user here was talking about how can someone get started in developing ZK solutions? Is learning Rust and CirCom a way to go? Are these essential requirements? I think from what we said, the answer is probably not, but I'd love your take on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, ultimately, you need to choose a tool or a set of tools that you're comfortable with and comfortable with investing in for the long term. And that's always, it's a great question. It's like probably the first one you should ask is, right, okay, I want to start working in zero knowledge. What tools or what things do I need to use? I think Rust is going to be useful anyway because it's so widely used. And then it's a question of, okay, what do I want to use for programming zero knowledge? And I think probably something like TypeScript, whether it's a 01JS or I think Kachang. Is that
Kachina, but very good. I'm impressed. I'm usually the one researching the guests, but you've actually done research on our stuff too. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Anthony and I didn't conspire. It's like we independently our projects chose to use TypeScript, but I think TypeScript is a good way to go. And then I think again, as you go onto a project website, certainly in Mina, the first place to go is docs, right? And you'll find some simple examples and explanations of how to get started, how to write your first Hello World ZK app program and start getting involved in there. So I think that's a good way to go. And there's no shortage of educational material on YouTube channels. Certainly, Mina Protocol YouTube channel has a lot of educational materials around zero knowledge.
Also, I'd say that, and this is an observation, since 2017, or probably even earlier, there's actually an incredibly active community around zero knowledge technology. And again, from the very beginning, not just for scalability and rollups, for smart contracts, for proofs, for identity. I've been to as many of the ZK or the Zero Knowledge Conference events as I can possibly go to. There are hackathons that appear fairly regularly. There is a very active community of very down-to-earth, very low ego, very excited and incredibly smart people who are very happy to see more people enter the scene and to see more people starting to learn to work with the technology. I don't think we're yet at the place where we see 30 or 40 of the best universities in the world have non-mathematical PhD level training courses for how regular developers can think about circuits. But I don't think we're far away. And I think that's probably something that foundations will start stepping into or starting to lean into or maybe collaborating together with is let's just get everybody on the same page on the basics of building circuits. Well, let's get everybody on the basics of proving systems.
And it's a zero knowledge. It's a different, like I'm not an engineer or a product person, but it is a different like mindset. It's not just like linear programming. It's probably maybe a little bit more like it's not quantum computing, but it's different.
It is mathematical. It is structural. It is programmatic. It is predictable. It is not magic. Very many people start descriptions of zero knowledge with the term magic, and it drives me up the wall because the second you tell somebody something is magic, you've lost them forever. I think the internet has killed people's belief in magic broadly, but it is complex, but it is not unaddressable or not insurmountable for anybody of any background. It just matters how you answer the questions, the things people want to know. Speaking of questions, I have another one here, which relates to interoperability. Now, at this point and this stage in the development of Web3 and blockchains in general, I don't think anybody assumes that we're going to have a single blockchain future or that there's going to be one blockchain that will do everything for everybody. You have interoperability between layer one chains where one operates as a partner chain or a layer two of a second chain. You look at Polygon, they're a layer one chain with their own token and their own consensus, but they were primarily brought up as a layer two of Ethereum. These lines are blurring, and we're eventually going to get layers 3, 4, and probably others over the course of time. From a Mina perspective, how do you look at interoperability and how Mina can provide capability that other protocols that don't have that programmable data protection built in? How are you thinking about the universe of other blockchains at this point in time?
Yeah, well, it is, I think, a multi-blockchain world that we're moving towards. And, certainly I'm not the first one to talk about modular blockchains or different functions of blockchains. Mina, there's several projects underway in terms of interoperability. At the core, though, the core premise, though, again, is that the entire state of the Mina blockchain, including some account data, right, can be included in that and is included in that less than 22 kilobyte proof. And that entire state can be contained within the smart contract of another chain. So Mina is not an native EVM compatible chain. It's its own layer one. We're working with a couple of partner who are building EVM bridges to Mina. One is a Lambda class bridge, which is under development, and they're currently frequently tweeting about the progress that they've made on that. We're also so that's a state bridge, and then also other development underway is wrapped token bridging, which will also soon be released. So the promise of interoperability is there, and then it's actually being worked on as we speak. But what's interesting about Mina and what that offers to other blockchains is, because of its infinite recursion, because of its ability to kind of consume recursively proofs and ingest proofs, it starts positioning or being able to be positioned as the universal proof layer or the proof of everything. So you can start having proofs of other proving systems, other blockchains contained into that state, and at a much lower cost than you can do it in other environments, and also in terms of the verification layer.
Super powerful, really, really powerful. Again, I see a world where you've got kind of large blockchains that have large amounts of value stored or amounts of value locked that may be slow moving, may be inefficient, but are very, very good and very, very secure. And then you have, like you described, proving systems, lightweight, easy to consume. The lighter the chain, the easier it is to create interactions between smartphones, mobile devices, IoT, and those chains. The more likely we are to see use cases making use of proofs. And I think that's very powerful and should be celebrated. What next for Mina? So we're coming close to the end of the show. Obviously, I don't want to have a full run through the roadmap, but what's coming next? What are you guys getting up to over the next couple of months? I'm assuming there'll be some conferences, there'll be some events, there'll be some hacks. There'll probably be some feature releases, but what are the things you would like the rest of the world to know of what's coming up for Mina?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Actually, very big news is we have a major upgrade being accomplished through a hard fork, which was announced a few weeks ago, but it's happening on June 4th. And this upgrade brings ZK apps from the DevNet onto mainnet. So we will be I don't know if we'll be the first, but one of the first to actually have ZK apps on a mainnet. And
Fantastic.
So that's, yeah, so that's a massive advance. Again, it's not the end game, right? That brings the capability onto mainnet. And it's not going to be like, oh, wow, this whole thing is like, just taking off. Of course, we want it to, but that's like a fundamental building block, because now it's like, it's really the beginning of the beginning of the beginning, or the second beginning, the renaissance, because it's like, okay, we're open for business now. You can start scaling, building businesses on top of that. And so that's going to be, so getting that fundamental building block released out there is the first big step. And then over the coming months, we'll see real businesses, projects being launched on that. But that's not going to happen on the same day, but that will happen in the following months. And just the day after that, I'll be at the Crypto Valley Association conference, their big annual conference, June 6th and 7th in Rockreuth. Would love to see folks there. If there's anyone that's going to be there, I'll be in Paris at Proof of Talk on the Monday after that. So I'll be around. But anyway, that's the big news for the upcoming hard fork.
That's fantastic. And as is tradition for you guys, Mina is pioneering the way, starting out, bringing interesting technology, interesting use cases. You've got a community of DApp builds already, and to be able to bring those on chain, to be able to bring those with real value at stake, real smart contracts in a production environment, that's the direction of travel. I think, like you said, set expectations appropriately. This is not the last release we do. This is not something. There will be more features. There will be more feedback, and things might go a little bit sideways along the way. But it's a major step, and congratulations to you and the team for getting there. I suspect on the 5th at CVA, you might be a little tired, or it may have been a bit of a late night for you the night before. Hopefully a good one, and you were up celebrating as opposed to up and talking to all of the teams and the engineers. But good luck with the launch. Good luck with the announcements and the discussion the day after. I will hopefully see you at Proof of Talk in Paris. I'll be there on the 10th as well. So I'm excited to hear all the news and how you guys get on. And thank you so much again for joining us today, Kurt. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe out there.
Likewise. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you to everyone who's dialed in. Thank you.
Awesome. See you soon.